Hello and welcome to World History e-learning for March 24th. We are looking at trench warfare as it regards to World War One. Trench warfare wasn't something new. It had existed before. It was just something that had never been used on this scale before. Um, Essentially, both sides would have had what we call trenches. These, dug in fortifications where you would have had soldiers lining all of this area. And here, this would have been your forward area. This would have been the rear, where you would have seen, more of your command type of people. This was more of your frontline soldiers. This area over here is what we called no man's land. No man's land was an area in between your trenches and the enemy's trenches, and it was an area in between that no one, necessarily controlled. One of the big problems that you're going to see with this war is that you get a lot of new technology, a lot of new weaponry involved. You combine that with trench warfare. You put in the fact that you've got a lot of people fighting the war that don't really understand yet how to use a lot of the new technology that's going to come out. There's going to be a lot of trial and error. So when it comes to, for example, the trenches. You might have a general say, "Hey, let's come out over the side and run at the other side and see what happens." Well, you had machine guns now, so they just kind of mowed these people down. A lot of people would have died in this area and would have simply been left there because nobody's going to stop to clean up the battlefield. So imagine being in France in the middle of July after these bodies have been laying here for months on end. Pretty horrible type of conditions. A little closer look at what this would have looked like. Same kind of thing. You've got your no man's land here. Here's your forward area. Here's your rear, and things of that nature. Okay, so to give you a little bit of an idea of just how far this was from one end of the trench to the other, you're looking at a size about 100 yards, about a foot, what a football field would be. So we're not talking about a ton of space here. One of the things about these trenches is it was a place that would have been infested with things like rats. Along with rats is going to certainly come disease and some pretty horrible conditions that it's going to come along with a lot of that disease. For example, if you look here, this is typical of what a trench would have been. You're going to get rainfall. There's really no place for that rainfall to go. You can see this guy right here is up to his knees in mud. Over in this one, when it wasn't mud, you still would have had water that would have collected in there. Water that sits around and doesn't move is a breeding ground for things like mosquitoes, which, just like rats, you guessed it, carry disease. That would have caused major problems. If you stay in those type of conditions, water, mud for too long, you can develop things called trench foot. Trench foot was a major problem, especially at the beginning of the war before they really knew that, hey, you need to take care of your feet. This was going to be a huge issue that they were going to deal with. Another picture of what trench foot would have looked like. Yeah, it was pretty horrible. So by the later stages of the war, it got to a point where it was a routine thing for people to check each other's feet, checking for signs of something like pinch foot starting to develop, so that they could just deal with the problem before it got to those points. Just some other pictures of what trench warfare would have looked like. Poison gas was a problem. It was something that was new that was being used during this time, and you can see what a no man's land would have looked like. Pretty awful, horrible type conditions. So once again, just an overview. Here's your trenches. Here's the other trenches, and you're going to go at each other.